Welcome to the Lean Out Your Business podcast, a show dedicated to helping entrepreneurs accelerate business growth and simplify success. I'm your host, Krista Grasso, and I've been working with businesses for more than 2 decades to help them lean out and optimize what's working while eliminating anything that's not adding value. So if you are ready to get more time back in your day, more profit in your business, and to do business differently, growing and scaling on your terms, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Lean Out Your Business podcast. All right, today I could not be any more excited because Jessica is back on the podcast with me. So if you are a longtime listener, you know Miss Jessica Maine. She's been around for a long time. She has been the superstar behind the scenes that keeps everything running. And if you used to be a part of our Facebook community, you know Jess well because she was live with you every single week for how long was it? At least a year. If not longer.
It was closer to 2. So it was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Jess is back. I am beyond ecstatic. And Jess is with us today. So Jess, I'm going to let you do the honors of introducing yourself to anyone who does not yet know you. And then what we're going to be talking about today, which I'm so excited about as well, is really how to become a visionary whisperer. So today's episode is especially relevant for anybody who works with founders in any capacity. And so we'll tell you a little bit more about what we mean in a moment. But for now, Jess, you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
All right. Thank you so much, Krista. It's so amazing to be back. It is very refreshing, and I am so ecstatic about all of the strides and the progress and all of the changes that we've made. So it's so good. And I just wanted to, do a little intro about me. For those that don't know me, my name is Jessica Maine, and I am the CSO within the Lean Out Method as well as Strategic Ops Institute. And also within the CSOO certification program, I am the advisor as well as the mentor. So it is such a joy to be able to engage with all of the participants that we have right now in this recent cohort and utilize those operation and strategic skills that I have. And so I'm just excited to keep going and see where this journey takes us.
I am too. It's been a wild ride. Jess has been with me since 2021, I think, for quite a long time. We had a little break in the middle there, and now Jess is back. And I knew when I was building Strategic Ops Institute, you know how you have those people in your life or the people that you've worked with at one point, and as you're building something or as you're thinking about something, you just know that that person is meant to be a part of it. The entire time I was thinking about Strategic Ops Institute and getting it off the ground, Jess was such a big part of the certifications that I deliver now in the Strategic Ops Institute when I used to deliver them in Lean Out Method. And so when I decided I was going to carve those off and turn them into their own business and their own brand, Jess was front and center. And so I'm excited that she's back. Everyone is super excited that she is there and leading so many of the calls and working so closely with everyone in the certification programs. And she's also a big part of our new community, which is called the Soul Collective, which is really, really exciting. And so what we were talking about earlier today and why we ended up recording this episode is this week we led our weekly CSOO live training and workshop. We do this every single week with people for an entire year. And right now we're focused on lean strategic planning. So we do a new system every 8 weeks. And we're in the middle of the lean strategic planning system right now. And somebody asked a really, really interesting question in this week's session. And it spurred some really great discussion, a lot of aha moments. We literally had like the mind blown emoji going in real life from people, which was wonderful.
Right.
And so we thought, why not dive in and talk a little bit about Visionary Whisperer, because it is such a critical skill to have. Whatever role you're in, whatever you do, if you work with founders in any capacity at all, having the ability to be able to translate what you're doing, your strategies, the operations, regardless of where you sit on the strategy or operation side of things, being able to speak founder and speak visionary and get across what you're doing, help them see what they need, report progress in a way that's meaningful, really makes a big difference in how you're received, how much you get paid, how long your engagements are. It's such a critical skill. And so many people focus so much on tactics or even on strategies and on the things you need to do, but not everybody always focuses on how you need to show up in order to have a really effective and long-term sustainable business if you work with other visionaries and if you work with founders. So, Jess, do you want to give a little insight into the convo that happened in our CSOO call this week?
Right, right. So one of the things that was very interesting is, especially as we progress, like you mentioned, we have the our weekly calls. It when it comes down to the implementation, it's one of those things to where when you have that ops minded brain and that's the way you work, it is sometimes hard to meet the visionary where they are. And so as a lot of operations minded people tend to think in terms of very execution oriented, very tactical. Sometimes there's a gap in the translation when it comes to actually communicating those points in a way to where there's value, it's concise enough, it's clear enough, as well as it's almost just like also convincing them that it's advantageous that they do something a certain way, especially if they have in their mind that they want to take a different approach. So as we were focusing on the implementation aspect of things, which was so extremely helpful, there was a question that came up in terms of how can you sell this to the visionary in someone's business to have them do it this way or similar to this fashion. It's like, how can you sell it? So it was one of those things to where you that's when that moment came up of like, okay, as an ops minded individual overall, especially with the a lot of the organizations and the consultants, et cetera, that we work with, it's one of those things to where it's like, how can I make this a fluid, more seamless transition?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because the person who was asking the question was approaching it from a very process oriented place, which is where many ops minded people approach things. To them, the world makes sense through systems and through processes. So they break it down into the parts and the pieces and the modules because for them, it's how they both understand it and it's also how they implement it and get successful results. But that's for an ops minded person. If you're a very creative minded, visionary minded person, a lot of times it's the opposite. Those structure, those processes can feel very constraining and very restrictive. And instead, you need things to be more open and more flow based and more free. And so it's how do you take this system of strategic planning, right? To a lot of founders, they're like, planning. Meanwhile, it is the thing that actually allows them to get the results that they want with consistency and predictability and to actually hit their revenue targets and to not overspend and to be profitable, right? All the things they want in their business are on the other side of strategic planning. But a lot of times they don't want to have the conversation because when the person who shows up who's really skilled at doing strategic planning, they're speaking in process. First, we're going to set our goals, and then we're going to break this goal down into this many projects, and then we're going to, into them, it makes sense. They're making order of the world. They're really, truly understanding deeply how to take a vision and make it reality, which is great. But to the founder, they hear boring or they hear Charlie Brown in their head. Like it's the want, right? Like it doesn't make sense to
Yeah.
the founder. So I was walking through how I actually facilitate strategic planning sessions with founders. And that was where kind of the mind blown conversation started coming up because what's interesting is I am the creator of the lean strategic planning framework. I have a system, a very systematized approach to what I do, but I do not use the language and I do not even talk about what I do with most founders. I get them where they need to go through a series of questions that to them feels very conversational and very organic. And on the back end, I am using the framework that I know works exceptionally well, that I've worked with businesses for 20 plus years using. And I am making sure that I am hitting and getting all of the things they need to connect that vision down to results. But I'm not processing them. I am not saying, okay, let's set our first 1 to 3 goals. Let's break these goals down into this many projects. Let's take these projects and make sure that they are no more than 1 month in duration. And so I know what I'm doing as I do that, and that's why they get the results. But I'm not telling them that. As I'm doing it, I'm putting it into visionary speak. I am translating for them in the way that they need to hear it so that they can actually think creatively and think openly and start actually thinking like a visionary instead of shutting that part of their brain down when they hear too much process speak.
Gotcha. So hearing you say all of that is so necessary, because that is so common to the point where it's like, okay, let's go ahead and get our planning session on the calendar, and then immediately it's like you go straight into, okay, what are our goals, what are like, and then you just kind of outline it. So that's what the typical and common way of doing things is, even if they do it internally with their own team. So at the end of the day, a question that I actually want to ask you, Krista, is if you can give us a little gem to where you give us like a little cheat of like, what is one of the questions that you might ask that prompts and speaks to the visionary's mind, instead of it being the traditional, what are your goals? Like, how do you kind of segue into that in a way that feels more fluid and more natural and less restricted to the visionary?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that I always start every conversation is with vision. To me, it's always rich, fulfilled life and vision. And those are very like rich, fulfilled life is a Krista term. I made that term up. That's one of my signature frameworks, right? So unless somebody has been in my world for a while, they don't know what I mean when I say rich, fulfilled life. So whether I use that language or not depends on how well I know they know my world. But at the end of the day, everyone has a rich, fulfilled life. They have the things that they want to be true that make them feel super passionate and super fulfilled and very much like they are living whatever you want to call it, soul's purpose, mission, dream, put any word on it. It's like everyone has those personal drivers for themselves that make them feel the way that they want to feel and that drive them to do what they want to do in the world. And so it's how clear are they on those things? And then how does that translate into their business and how does that translate into their role in the business? And so all I'm doing is I'm asking leading questions. And it usually starts with, all right, so we are meeting in the beginning of January, a year from today, and we're talking and you're telling me this was the most incredible year that you have ever had in your business. And not only was it the most incredible year that you've ever had in your business, but you had an absolutely amazing lifestyle along with it. You did not have to trade one for the other. Tell me what that looked like for you. What conversation do you want to be having when we're meeting in January a year from today? And so I start there with people and I want them in a place of possibility and dream. I want them in the wouldn't it be amazing if headspace. And so when they
Mm.
get there and they're like, oh, well, today, I mean, right now I'm working like 80 hours a week. I don't know that I could do that. I'm like, no, let's imagine for a moment that we were able to fix that problem because anything's fixable. Like, what would it look like? What would you want this year to look like? And so we start in that place. If they start to go to a place of constraints, I try to just get them back into a place of possibility. And once we get through the place where they have like crystal clarity on what they really want for the year, I know they've got their vision for the year. And then I go into and I start getting at their goals. Whether or not I use the word goal with them depends on the person and how much I think it would be supportive for them or how much I think it would be restrictive for them. But at the
Mm.
end of the day, I'm usually saying, amazing. So now let's look at the year and start thinking about what might get us there. What are some of the things that you think would be really important to be able to accomplish and do throughout the year in order to make that possible? Like, what would make that real for you? And usually they start talking, they're like, oh, well, I would need to do this, and I would need to do this, and I would need to do this. And I'm not editing anything they're saying at that point. I'm not like, that's never going to get you there, right? No, I'm just, it's like, okay, great. Yeah, what else? What else? Okay. And how about this? And sometimes I'm asking leading questions to get them to see certain things that they might not have seen on their own. But generally, I'm just still letting them stay in a place of possibility and dreaming at that point. And then what I do when they get through like the here's what it would take, then I start to break it down into actual goals, like real goals. And again, I don't always use this language with them. It depends on the person. But what I get at is so what I'm hearing is it sounds like in order to really get there this year, is these like four things would be the things that would be the most important. If we were able to do A, B, C, and D in your business, do you feel like we could really get there? Absolutely. We could amazing. Now let's talk about your team. Do you feel like you have the right people surrounding you that would be able to help you get there? Well, I don't have somebody who can do this. I'd need to, okay, great. So is that somebody you'd be interested in hiring this year? Yes, yes, right. If they say no, then it's like, okay, well, then maybe we want to look in this other direction at that other thing instead, right? And then we do the same thing with like tech, with tools, with finances, with, we kind of go through, but I'm not like, do you have the budget for this? Do you have like, I'm just more asking from that place of more possibility, and I'm asking leading questions. Like when you think about these, you've got four things here. Is there any one that you feel like would be a little harder to be able to swing from an investment perspective? Or do you feel like all of these would be feasible? Right. And so it's just leading questions, and it's very conversational, very possible. And then as we get through, I get to a place of practical with it. And that's where I start to say, listen, as we've been talking, I know we talked about these four, but it sounds like this one is going to be a really heavy lift for you. You're going to have to hire this type of skill set that you don't have today. You're going to have to invest in this technology you don't have today. It's going to be a pretty big financial investment. This other one that we didn't pull in, I'm wondering if that couldn't get you the same result, but for a lighter lift. And so then we'll start talking about it. And at the end, what they have is a clear vision. They have clear goals for the year, and they have some idea of how those things are going to break down. But I didn't say, all right, let's set your vision. Okay, now
Exactly.
let's pick three goals. Okay, now
Right.
let's break that goal down. And like, it's a different way of approaching it. But what's interesting is what I'm sharing with you is founder speak. Founder speak and team speak are two totally different things. And one of the things that's really interesting about being a right hand to a visionary or to a founder, if you're in that CSOO role, which you're not in a CSOO role unless you're in my certification program, because I'm the only one who certifies people as CSOOs. But if you are in that role as like a fractional COO or a director of ops or an OBM or any type of operational role, or you're a consultant, a coach, a strategist, somebody who advises a founder, right? Whenever you're in that role, you are usually in between the founder and the people who are doing the work. You usually sit at that level in my Lean Dream Team pyramid where the visionary is at the top. You've got the people doing the work, who are actually executing. And in between is where that strategy and operations person sits. And so you have to understand how to speak founder, visionary, and you have to understand how to speak team. And when you speak team, all of a sudden there is process speak. At that point, you're like, no, no, we can only have three goals for this quarter, because if you have more than three goals, we can't get it all done. We need to have our projects fit within a month. So you speak different depending on who you speak to, which is really interesting and can be such a challenging role to be in for people. Do you find that as well, Jess? Because you very much sit in that role in the same way that I do for a lot of businesses.
Right, I do. And it's almost like you're a translator to the point where it has to funnel and filter through you, um, from a space of actually even being able to convey messages back to the visionary and the founder from the perspective of the ones that are executing and actually doing the work. So, and sometimes even as that middle person, so to speak, it takes a little bit to process that, to make sure that you're conveying the message on behalf of the founder the way that it actually needs to, because there are so many things that may not be explicitly stated, but as you're walking along this journey and you're asking the questions that you're asking, that's where you figure out what's really important. Because there are often instances where, and that's why I love the approach that you're referring to, because you're allowing them to almost have a playground as the visionary of like, okay, what, so the good thing is that we already know that they can identify as a visionary. So as you're telling them, basically paint this picture for me, and then let me then try to narrow a bit, not even narrow it, but scope it in a way to where it's like, okay, now this becomes actionable, to the degree of, okay, now we're asking the right questions to make you think about it a little differently, and then you know that the goal, well, the direction that you're trying to take it in, though there are going to need to be some actions and activities that are associated with it, to in order for this vision to be able to come to light. So the good thing is that you have to pay attention to what's being said, and then what's not being said, and that's what guides those questions for you as that middle ground, to be that the one to make sure you fill in any gaps. And so there's so much power in that aspect alone, because then you're able to communicate that to the team and make sure that you're creating the opportunities for the founder to be able to stay in a space where the like just the culture of the entire team and organization can actually thrive in a different way. So if each role is able to excel in what it is that they do, then there's way more harmony that's able to take place on the team. And so yes, it's very critical. So you have to think about how to say the things that are explicitly stated as well as the things that are not, and how to bridge those gaps.
Well, you said the key word there because I think anytime you serve in a right hand capacity to a founder, again, whether you're more on a strategy side or more on an operations side, either way, you are the bridge. And being the bridge is one of the most critical things that you can be typically for a business's success. But it's also one of the most challenging things because you're bridging between two different things. And you, as the bridge, are the one that is the translator in both directions. Like you're opening the lanes in both directions on the bridge, and you have to be the one that kind of masters that. And what I find for those of you listening who you're like, I am a visionary, and boy, that does sound like it would be a way better version of planning than what I normally experience. The reality is the people that you have on your team, if they are very much process thinkers, that's great. It means that they're going to be very good about making sure that things aren't missed, making sure that things get done. It's such an incredible strength, but it can be challenging for those of you who are visionary minded because it's like you're speaking two different languages sometimes. And I think it's really important that people who are more ops minded and more process minded, that they learn how to think strategically. I think that we need a blend of strategy and operations. And those who are more on the strategy side, the advisors, the coaches, the consultants, you need to be more operationally minded as well. It is not strategy or ops, it is strategy and ops. And in order for a business to be successful, you need both. Just like you frequently hear me talking about, it's not marketing or ops, it's marketing and ops. It is usually an and when it comes to operations. And where people end up not super successful in ops roles is when they are only operations. It needs to be strategy and operations. And with so many of the changes in the market, I think that's so much more critical than ever before, which is kind of the catalyst behind the Strategic Ops Institute. But that being said, as you're listening and you're looking at your team and you're like, I've got some really great process thinkers or some great operations thinkers on my team, but I don't know that I have anyone who's really a strategic thinker. I don't know that I have anyone who could guide me through any practice, not just a planning practice, but anything that I need and speak visionary. Like it's always a struggle when we have these conversations because we're kind of saying different things. I think the best investment that you can make in that person is to help them think more strategically. It will help them and it will also help you. And if you are that person, invest in yourself so that you can think more strategically. And again, if you're more on the strategic side, make sure that you can balance that with the operations to be able to efficiently and effectively implement on those strategies. I just think that that blend is so critical and becoming increasingly more critical.
Right. I agree. And especially that's everything you just said speaks to the educator in me, to the point of always being aware of there's a presence of blind spots of some degree. So the thing about it is that if you already know that if you tend to gravitate to one over the other, it's really critical to be able to have that self awareness, and then also take the initiative to make sure that you equip yourself with the knowledge and the resources that you need in order to be more effective. Because that's where you like the key is the strategy and ops, the whole concept of strategic ops institute. And so it's one of those things to where it's like, yes, you can have one without the other, but you won't make the progress and get where you're going in a sustainable way, in a scalable way, without having both. It's that critical.
Yeah, and that's what I call the soul. So you'll hear me say a lot, does your business have soul? SOL. And it's strategy and operations leader. And it's the catalyst not only behind the brand, but it's behind the collective that we have. I mentioned we have a whole community for strategy and operations leaders. It's called the Soul Collective. And it's something that I'm super, super passionate about. It's something that those who go through our certification programs, we work on visionary whisperer skills all the time in the programs, but I know not everyone is going to go through the certification programs. Not everyone may be ready to get certified or interested in getting certified as a CSOO or as an EPM and entrepreneurial project manager. So I created the Soul Collective specifically to have a place where we could go and teach these skills and give people things to think about, new ways of thinking, new ways of being, new ways of leading within the businesses that they work, whether they advise and are strategists and consultants or whether they are operational leaders, to blend those things together. A big piece of what we do is that visionary whisperer kind of approach to things, to have people thinking about how they need to speak visionary, because again, nothing kills a contract or shortens the life of an employment faster than not being able to connect with the founder, or if you are the founder, not being able to connect with that person on your team. Even if you're rock star individuals, if you can't do the Venn diagram where there is some meaningful overlap in the middle, it is not going to last. And so to me, I felt that that was so incredibly important. And I know Jess is one of the key leaders in Soul Collective, and I'm excited for that because it's one of your superpowers, Jess. So I think it's just something that we need so much more of. And as you're looking at what to do for your team for the holidays, or as you're looking at what to do for your business, gift your business something for the holidays, invest in your team or invest in yourself to kind of balance those skill sets out and find a place to do that. So whether that's Soul Collective or whether that's somewhere else, I think at the end of the day, that to me is what will make things so much simpler and so much more sustainable in business.
Right. And one of the additional components that I want to speak to is also the reality of the world of strategic operations can sometimes feel a little lonely, because what I've noticed is that as you are the bridge, you may have a team that you're helping and convey all of this information to. You may be the only ops person on the team. And with that being said, is you may not always have someone to understand exactly what you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And it's not that it's just overwhelming, it's the reality of sometimes you need that additional support and community to be able to even think through, think out loud, in a sense of being able to be like, okay, this group, this community can understand exactly where I'm coming from, because it's a special type of brain when you know you're an operations brain, and especially as you're bridging the gap and being strategic ops with that as well. And so it's a community where there's support, as well as another component is also thinking through the fact that there's so many moving parts and so many things that you need to remember. It's nice to know that there's a place where you can go to get important critical updates, to where everything isn't solely dependent on you having to do the additional research, as well as having to stay on top of all of the activities and tasks that you're needing to make sure are taken care of on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I call that the in the know part of the
Yeah.
collective. And so I noticed that for me, I'm on all of these different lists and I'm like, what's changing? What tools are happening? What's going on in AI? What's going on in the industry? What do we need to know? What's this report that we need to file before the end of the year? We're going to get fined $5,000 a day. Like there's all of these different things that are going on all the time. And inevitably, I'm answering the same questions or I'm reminding all my clients and I'm like, hey, did you file this yet? Hey, by the way, did you hear that this podcast platform is going away? If you have this on your site, make sure you remove it. Like, and so we're constantly doing that. And I was like, I really wish there was just a centralized place where you could go and get all of this. And I was like, let's be that centralized place. Because as somebody who advises founders, you need to know all these things. And so if you're listening and you're like, yeah, I have like 18 emails that I'm subscribed to that I scour each day to make sure that I'm not missing anything important. So I'm making sure that I advise the businesses I work with. Well, we just pull that all together into the collective so you don't have to do that. and we do it for
Right.
you. But if you listen to last week's episode where I talked about certifications and I took you behind the scenes about some of the logic and how I built CSOO and EPM and why I did that, I wanted to make sure that I had the collective as part of the offer suite. So I'm going to do a little sidebar on just kind of offer suite strategy here is I think, when you have really high level programs and really deep programs, like we do longer scale programs, like we do with EPM and CSLO, I always think there is so much value in having some kind of community aspect within your business where you can help people who aren't yet ready for those things, but who need one of those core skills that is going to be completely transformational for not just them, but for the people that they're working with. And so that was a big part of the catalyst for launching this for me. And it's something I'm so excited about. Like we used to do a Facebook group. Every week we would go live in the Facebook group, back in the heyday when Facebook groups were all the rage and weekly lives were all the rage. We did this for years and I miss it. Like I don't miss Facebook. I am never on Facebook. You will never find me there. Sorry, Facebook. But that being said, like it makes me so excited to actually have a community again and to be going live with people again and to be interacting and chatting with people again. And it is totally not on Facebook, which also makes me happy. So, anyway, all that being said, at the end of the day, you want to be a visionary whisperer if you work with other visionaries. You want your team to be visionary whisperers if they are working with you and you are a visionary. And especially if you own some kind of agency or some kind of business where you have a team who's working with other founders on your behalf, you want them to be visionary whisperers as well. Very much a skill set to be thinking of. And just, I always think about understand the difference between a visionary mind and a more operationally mind and know who you're speaking to regardless of what your role is. And if you could do that translation and you understand and approach things from that other perspective, you are always going to have far better results and be so much more resonant with the person that you're working with. So, Jess, anything else that you want to add before we round out our visionary whisperer conversation?
Um, Not that I can think of specifically. Well, actually, I take that back. Yes, I do. You speaking to the community aspect of things, I think, is what is really important and valuable in addition to all of the other components because it's just something about being able to come together in a safe space and know that you can bounce your ideas in a way off of other people that may not even have a direct relation or connection, but at the same time it's knowing that you can make the progress that you need to make and that you're not alone. I think that component alone is extremely valuable. And so I'm really excited about being able to connect because you already know I'm really big on the whole impact, the human component of things, making sure that people have access to knowledge and resources. And so Soul Collective is the place where all of that comes together in a very special way. And I truly believe that it's going to be far more inclusive than we ever could have imagined, even from the evolution from the Facebook group. So I'm excited about it. And so that's my final point.
Absolutely. So, with all that being said, the reason we wanted to talk about Soul Collective tonight, even in the context of Visionary Whisper, is because right now we have a super special founding members rate, which is pretty exciting. So, if it sounds like something of interest to you, head over to strategicopsinstitute.com/collective and get all the details. But you will see the pricing on the page. It's pretty ridiculous right now, I will say. It's pretty amazing. So, definitely check that out. If you do not see the founder special on the page, depending on when you're listening to this episode. Sorry, all those spots have been filled and taken. But if you do see it there, great opportunity to grab one of those. And we would absolutely love to welcome you in to our monthly workshops and all of the cool stuff that we've got going on over there. And in the meantime, take a look at how you can embrace some of the visionary whisperer stuff that we talked about tonight. So, Jess, thank you so much for being on the podcast again. It's so nice to have you back.
Yes, thank you for having me. And I'm excited just to connect even more. And I'm hoping I can make another appearance in the near future.
Of course, you might see the Krista and Jess show going forward quite
Right.
often.
That'll work.
All right, well, I hope you got a ton of value out of this week's episode. I'll see you again next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode. If you have not yet taken our scalability assessment, I invite you to head to leanoutmethod.com/assessment and take our interactive assessment that's going to help you look at how simple, how sustainable, and how scalable your business currently is. It includes personalized recommendations of where to focus next to get your time back, to increase your impact, increase your profits, and ultimately step into your rich, fulfilled life. And finally, we'd love to see you inside our signature program, Simplify to Scale. You can head to leanoutmethod.com/ops to find all of the details on how we can help you uplevel your operations and get out of the day-to-day of your business.